Welcome back to another one of our studies in Ephesians. Today we're going to be looking at Ephesians 5:25 to 33. So please follow along as I read. That's Ephesians 5:25 to 33. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water with the word, and to present her to himself as a radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. In the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. After all, no one ever hated their own body, but they feed and care for their body just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I am talking about Christ and the church. However, each of you also must love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. Well, Paul here is continuing this discussion about the Christian marriage. Of course, we talked about wives last week. Now he talks about husbands, and actually in this we see right away that although wives are to submit to the husbands, husbands are given the responsibility to give sacrificially for their wives. So there's a higher price for the husband than the wife in the marriage relationship. They are to give sacrificially, like Christ gave himself for the church, which of course he died for the church. He gave everything for the church, and a husband is to give everything for his wife. Now that's a challenging thing, especially not just in this day and age, but especially back in the time when this was written. If you remember, the Jewish practice of marriage was that a man, for any reason or no reason, could say three times, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you, and that was the end of the marriage. And he walked away from it. It was worse for the Greeks and the Romans. They had multiple marriages. There Romans, and in Roman history, there's records of people being married as much as 25 times, and they didn't count their history by this happened when I was this old, but when I was married to this person, then this happened, I was married to that person. And so marriages were disposable and women were disposable. Women were required in the Roman households to stay at home, and the wives they were supposed to have babies. They were supposed to keep the house. That was about it. They weren't allowed really out. And the men had mistresses or consorts who they went out in public with and so on. And so it was a crazy thing. Women were of no account whatsoever. So here Paul comes with Christianity and says something very, very different. He says that not only are wives supposed to submit, okay, got that, but that husbands are not supposed to treat their wives as a piece of property. They're not supposed to treat them as another servant in the house, but they are to love them sacrificially as Christ loved the church. And how did Christ love the church? He loved the church so it could be all that it was meant to be. And then in a Christian marriage, a husband is to help his wife, and in reverse, a wife help her husband become all they can be. It should not be that a husband sabotages his wife or a wife sabotages her husband so that they cannot be all that they can be, especially in their service to the Lord. So this is a very important thing for us to realize and to understand that this is what Paul is saying. This is revolutionary, what he is saying. And I'm sure that when the Ephesians heard it, the women sat up right away and took notice and said, wait a minute, this is different than anything we've heard. And I'm sure the husbands thought, whoa, 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 what are you saying? This is going to change around everything in my household. And let me tell you, my friends, when Christ comes into a house, it ought to change everything in someone's household. It ought to make things different. It ought to make a difference in the way that husbands and wives relate to each other and how they love each other. And of course, how they relate in the relationship to the Lord and what he does. Now he says that we are to love we are husbands are to love our wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word. And what is really Paul saying there? Well, he's essentially saying that we are to love our wives and help them to be all they can be to the Lord, their cleansing, their purity before the Lord, that this is how we're to love them, and that we are to make sure that we help them become holy before the Lord. And that means we don't stand in their way. Instead, that we we do all we can to help them, again, develop spiritually. I know I'm repeating myself here, but it's important to state that the man's role, as far as the Bible is concerned, looking back at the Old Testament, the man's role is to be the priest of the family. He's supposed to be the spiritual head of the family. Yet, how many men have abdicated that role, have not been the priest in their family, have let the either not gone to church and not given a commitment to the Lord, and let the wives do it if there's anybody who does it at all. And sometimes not the husband and wife either, but the children are left to their own devices to find the Lord. And it's sad to see that. What we know is this: in Western society, we can say this pretty strongly, that if children are the ones who go to church, there's less than 10% chance the rest of the family will go, eventually become involved in the church. If the wives go to church and become faithful, there's less than maybe 25% chance that the whole family will become involved in church. If the husband goes to church, there's like a 75% chance that the whole family will be involved in church. And you think about your core or your church, how many men come and the rest of their family doesn't come? The fact is, if the man is there, most of the time, the rest of the family is there. But how many women come without their husbands and they don't ever come? So the husband has this role that he's supposed to play in being the priest of the family, and that includes looking at the spiritual welfare of all the people in his family and bringing them to Christ and helping them to become all that they should be. And Paul goes on to say, look, it's not enough for you to look out for yourself. He says, you're to love your wife like you love your own body. Well, does he mean that we just, I love my body more than anything else? He may be saying that we should have a healthy self-love. That's true. But he also is saying, look, when you're hungry, you feed yourself. When you're thirsty, you get something to drink. When you're tired, you go to bed. And he's saying the same way that you take care of your needs, you need to love your wife and your children, if we can go ahead and say that, in a way that, and take care of them like you take care of yourself. There's none of this idea of you go do this for me, and you go do that for me. It's the idea that we are to take care of them and to cherish those people in our families, of our wives especially, and we are to take care of them like Christ takes care of the church. Christ feeds the church. Christ gives the church what it needs to be strong. And that same kind of responsibility is there for husbands to do for their wives, for their families. And in fact, Paul goes back to Genesis when talk about Adam and Eve, and he quotes there in the 31st verse, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So this is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. So what Paul has done here is the church illustrates the family, how that's supposed to be, but the family also illustrates how the church is supposed to be. And the Lord, this mystery of the Lord, the church is his bride, and he loves it, he takes care of it, and also how we take care, we who are men, I'm talking men now, take care of our wives is to be a model so people can look and see how Jesus feels about his church. Now, let me say one more thing before I close this. Because of what we say here, we're saying there's never an excuse for a man to lift his hand in violence against a woman. Not ever, never, ever. Is there a reason? I think a man can protect himself. He's certainly attacked by a woman, but he has no reason to hit or beat or in any way abuse a woman, not just physically, emotionally, or in any other manner. There's no excuse for it. Christ doesn't do that toward his church. Christ doesn't beat on his church. Christ does not kick his church. And I'm saying to you, if there are any men who claim to be Christians and yet they are physically violent against their church, their wives, they are totally against the will of God. And I question whether even really Christians at all, or they've backslidden, they've surrendered, and they certainly bring shame, not just in their own family. They bring shame to the cause of Christ. So if you know of anybody who's doing it, don't you stand by and let the woman be abused. You do something, you say something. And if you're one of these who do it, you stop it. You go to God humbly and you confess your sin and you offer yourself in a new way and ask him to totally cleanse you, and go to your wife and humbly apologize for any time you've ever hurt her. Well, I'm sorry to get off on that, but I feel very strongly about it that there's no excuse, ever an excuse, for a man to abuse a woman. Well, there's some things for us to think about, the challenge for us, and let's pray that God makes us equal to the challenge. Have a great week. God bless you.